Charlene.
Charlene.
Charlene is here.
Yes.
This is extremely personal. This is a big moment for you. But tell me about Charlene and how this song, tell me about the real Charlene and then how that became Charlene.
So you want the sweet tea is what you're asking
I want
for.
the tea.
So Charlene is a real person, and she, without getting too far into her business, she was a lady who collected the rent check for my small business in Nashville at the time. And once a month I would go into her office and pay her our check because she ran the books for the building. And I had a rapport with her. She's a Southern woman who is a devout Christian woman. She, sang gospel music and all that. And one day, just out of the blue, in my mind, she pushed back from her desk and she just said, "Cody, I've really been praying for you." And in the South, that's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Right.
It's kind of like bless your heart. Because especially if you don't have a death in the family or you're not hitting the skids, like that could mean anything. And so I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, you and my brother," who she has a brother who has been with his partner for eons. He's happy and bliss. And she said, "You and my brother, I've just really been praying about it, and I don't think you're going to get into heaven with me." And just that whole way of phrasing it, like she was certain of her salvation at the same time that she was certain of my damnation. And I just felt like, how are you doing this in your brain? And so I was trying to sort of figure it out with her. And I said, maybe Charlene, God is bigger than this box you've got him in on your desk. And maybe, what if I was sent to your office today to broaden your mind and to save you, And I tried to give her my Southern Baptist testimony about, I'm saved just like you, and Jesus is with me every day, and blah, blah, blah. And she just wouldn't have it. And it was the first time in my life that somebody they weren't questioning my faith, they were telling me my faith and where I was wrong in my faith, and that what I believed God had told me when I was a little boy of, you're a light, shine it, I'm sorry that you don't want this for yourself, but this is how I made you, and you're just going to have to get through it. That's the message I got when I prayed and prayed and prayed for something. And so she couldn't be persuaded, and I left her in her judgment, literally, and went home and just was so angry. I was mad at her, and I was mad at myself for some reason that I couldn't get her there, because I'm so resolute in my own faith. So I sat down and I wrote the song start to finish. And sometimes when I'm writing music, I like to write by myself. I don't like a bunch of co-writers. Some songs take me a long time to write. I'll just fiddle with it for years sometimes. But Charlene, I sat down and I wrote top to bottom in one sitting. And it was like this communion for myself. It was a reminder of what God had told me all those years ago, which is, don't sweat these people, because you and me are cool.
Right.
And so I felt like I needed to call it Charlene. I don't even mention her name until the very end of the song. And then it's just like a repeat of, you're going to get what you're due, and I'm going to get what I'm due. And it's neither one of our business of who gets what. But I felt like it was important to name her and call it out, because now there are Charlenes everywhere. The Charlenes of the world, and more specifically the United States, are trying to shape our society in their image. not even in Jesus's image, because they're so far off the message of Christ that, you know, it's dangerous. And I'm just trying to position this in a way, which is why I put the cross in the music video, why I put her name on the cross, was to just almost like snap them out of this hypnosis that they're in and say, you've been using this cross as a weapon. I'm just using it as a mirror to say, what are you really doing? Are you acting like Charlene, or are you acting like Jesus?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, you mentioned the cross in the music video. You literally made it, literally, with your hands.
Yeah.
It was really emotional for you. What were you feeling putting that cross together, and why was it something that just, it really, I saw that, you know, in the footage of when you made it, it really hit you.
Well, I knew that it needed to be big just for the scale of the scene that I wanted it to be in for the video. So it ended up being, you know, 13 feet tall by 8 feet wide. And when I was building it, I was thinking, is this even going to work? You know, I didn't even know if I had it in my brain, you know, sort of mechanically how I thought it was going to stand up and how I was going to turn all the lights on, but I didn't know if it was going to come together. And in this sort of divine kind of way, every single board and nail and even how many light bulbs I ended up having, it was just the right amount. Everything was perfect. And it wasn't until we stood it up in the middle of that field and plugged it in, and it all worked, that I realized, just like when I wrote the song, and that was a communion with God, building the cross was a communion with God. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Jesus, there's this old folk song, I don't remember who wrote it, but it's called Jesus Was a Crossmaker, because he was a carpenter and learned the trade from Joseph, apparently. And so when you think about it in terms of he was building those types of things back in that time, and then they used it to crucify him. And then here I am sticking Charlene on the cross, not to crucify her. That's not the point. The point is to say, y'all have taken Jesus so far out of the picture and put yourselves in the role of judge and jury. And so the cross means something totally different today than it did, you know, when Jesus died on it. So for me, building the cross was just like almost like reclaiming the narrative. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't like bullies, and I don't like people that are rude. And so for me, I always just try to poke that and tell somebody when they're wrong in that. Because Jesus just wanted us all to get along and take care of the poor and the hungry and the forgotten and the troubled. Past that, we're not supposed to get in the way of anybody's business.
What a time, if you think about what's going on. You obviously live in Tennessee and Nashville, with so many states right now having these conversations about repealing our rights, especially when it comes to trans people, to LGBTQ youth. Mm-hmm. What do you hope now that you're putting this song out? What do you want people, you know, that maybe they just stumble upon it and, you know, they hear it and what do you want some of those people that are really trying to keep us down, you know, if they hear your song, what do you want them to realize?
My hope is that it's a conversation starter around dinner tables across the country in ways that, like, maybe somebody's sister sees it and she's like, have y'all seen this? And because the thing about us in the LGBTQ alphabet, it's always that until someone knows one of us personally, they have these misconceptions. It's like us talking about how people in a poll asking, what's a trans person that you know? And they say RuPaul, who is not a trans person. But it's the ignorance of, you know, just not knowing someone. And so my hope is that if you're around the dinner table and one of your relatives is like, well, I don't like XYZ because of ABC, someone can then say, well, you're kind of acting like Charlene right now. And I'm hoping that it sort of enters the zeitgeist as like the religious Karen, right? Because I just think they all need reminding of Jesus's message, period. And, you know, churches across the United States have themselves become weaponized, and members are throwing out their pastors and preachers if the pastors and preachers don't like fall in line behind QAnon. And it's just like so bizarre that, you know, in my brain, church is supposed to be like Mayberry. It's supposed to be like a Norman Rockwell painting, but it's ugly. And truthfully, in a lot of ways, especially across the South, it's always been a little ugly. It just was powder coated in this nice thing that they've sort of worn that off, and now we're getting the real juice of it. I know that Charlene, to them, will be a little dangerous, but I just think it's time to just pull the lid off of it and let's all look at it.
Have you wrapped your head around Charlene actually hearing it herself?
You know, when I play the song out live, I've played it for years because I wrote it in like 2014, never knowing that the United States was going to be like it is right now. And I always say, she doesn't know that I wrote the song, she doesn't know that I play it for people, and she sure as shit doesn't know it's called Charlene. But I do wonder how she's going to. There's one scenario where I think maybe I'll get a card in the mail one day where she's like,
maybe she'll come around.
I'm so sorry. Mm-hmm. Or the alternate version is that it just hardens her. But, you know, I can't help that. That's none of my business.
How do you, this is definitely a new era for you.
Yeah.
How are you feeling in it? And I think, you know, putting this out there, it's really, like you said, you've been playing it, but this is like really putting it out there.
Yeah. I think if I had released it back when I wrote it, it wouldn't have mattered so much. It just would have gone into the ethos of, you know, music that is released every day. It's a little scary. I never, ever, ever thought that I was going to have to be such an activist. I found Nina Simone in college. I knew nothing about her or her music before then, and when I discovered her and started just consuming everything I could of hers, she said that artists are meant to be a reflection of the times, and if you're not doing that, then what are you doing? You're wasting your gift. And that stuck with me, but I never knew how I was going to apply that to my work until I started writing about my own experiences. And it took me as a songwriter a long time to come around to the notion of tell your truth. I was scared to tell that. I didn't think I could be a country singer for a long, long time. And it wasn't until Ty Herndon, you know, came out, and a few others, and then the show Nashville came out, and they had a gay storyline on that show, and I thought, well, if they kill him off like they always do, the gay characters, if he drives, you know, his car off a cliff because he just can't deal or whatever, this is gonna decide what Nashville as a business town does with gay artists. And luckily, we all just started showing up and in our own authenticity, our own unique versions of who we are, which is all country music is supposed to be anyway. So I am finding it's like I'm comfortable in the space of you know, calling out the injustices, but I'm also like resolute in it. I'm firm in it because I know what's right, and I know that if you don't stand up for yourself and for our community, who's going to do it?
Speaking of standing up, you were at the CMT Music Awards, looking
was.
very fabulous, by the way.
That was fresh.
That was great. Austin, Texas, you were there. I remember watching that show, and it was like, first off, I've never heard the words LGBTQ on stage at a country music show. When
No.
Meg Thee Stallion talked about it, about Shania.
Yes.
There was that, but then Kelsey Ballerini bringing...
I was gooped, gobsmacked.
What was that like for you?
Well, first
I mean,
of all,
to be in that room, too. Like,
yeah, it was my first time being there and getting to walk the carpet. And then, so I'm almost done with the press part of the carpet. And I turned around and there's, the queens. Kennedy Davenport being there.
Manila.
I mean, I could have just had Manila and Kennedy, and then to have Jan Sport also. It was just like, it was a lot to see, and I just kept thinking, am I on the right red carpet? Like, fortunately, we are, because CMT is so good about wanting to be inclusive.
Yeah.
That's part of their mission. We get to be in that space. Unfortunately, you don't see the country singers there whose audiences need to see it the most. So because I think they're maybe turned off by the idea of the inclusivity. So for Kelsey Ballerini, she gained a new mega fan out of me because I just could not believe that and that CMT allowed it, and then that CBS, like just up the chain, that all this was approved to be on people's television sets. And, there's always going to be those that turn it off, but there's surely people that saw it and were like, oh, well, it softens it a little, especially when it's so well done, like how they did that, and that the way it was, the set, the whole concept was brilliant.
I was so happy with it, and thank you for sharing that. And this is like the new era for you.
Yeah.
We have Charlene out now, and I would bet there's new music coming in addition toward the end of the year or so.
Yeah, so Charlene I wanted it to be its own moment in time. It's not going to be on the record that comes out later in the year, but maybe I hope that I'm singing Charlene the rest of my life, but I hope it's in a way that's celebratory and not right now, which is in defiance of everything that's going on. But the new music is, we're sort of calling it swamp noir. We're calling it southern glam rock,
yes,
deep fried disco. These are all terms that I've sort of applied to the sound. I've always wanted to have a record that you could dance to, but that was also poignant. And so my political point of view is throughout. And then, I figured once you get all the songs together and you know what you're gonna, what the whole record is gonna look like, it occurred to me, country music these days, there's not really a song that doesn't say something about whiskey or, beer or trucks. And my songs, nearly every one says something about God. And I realized that and thought, why is that? And it's really because I'm not a religious person anymore, but I have this sort of conduit that I'm always tied in to the divine, and I'm always in conversation like you with God. And so I was a little worried about that at first, and then I realized that no, that's that truth thing again. You have to just tell your truth. And so people need to know that God makes us all who we are, and that we're all allowed to be loved, at the end of the day.